All right, peeps, so here we are. It's time for our very first episode of Emotional Fire, which is going to be the analysis of the emotional fuel columns that I posted up. I gave you a little bit of background information the other day, the motivation behind originally writing this column. So here we are, column number 1, which was written back in April of 2010. It had the intriguing title, Sophocles and Dorian Yates, because, I figured that would be great marketing, pulling a lot of people who weren't aware of Sophocles and Dorian Yates and the connection between the two. Back then, I wasn't all that creative with the titling of these pieces. Was my first one, kind of sucked. Anyways, going over some highlights. Obviously in the beginning, I give a little bit of background on why I wrote the column, which I explained in that intro video the other day. No reason to really cover that ground again. I think one of the most interesting topics is when I'm talking about that, there's this theme of relentlessness, kind of always plugging away, just beating the shit out of something until you've absolutely conquered it. And I talk about this client that kind of nagged me to write the column and how he was just relentless. He wouldn't give up, wouldn't give me an inch. And for any of you guys that know me, when you're giving me excuses, bullshit reasons why you can't train, why you can't stick to your diet, why you can't do X, Y, or Z, whatever the fuck it might be on that particular day, you know that I'm pretty relentless in my approach. I'm going to find a way, I'm going to find a means to overcome that objection, whether it's strategic planning, whether it's just battering it down into the ground. Relentlessness, in my opinion, is one of those things that's absolutely key and crucial to accomplishing any one of your goals in life. Doesn't matter what it is. You just have to kick the living shit out of something until you own it. And there's no other way to go about life in general, but specifically when you have a goal that you're trying to accomplish. I didn't really go into it when I wrote this originally, but the actual title of the series, Emotional Fuel, that is a term that I stole from Ayn Rand, who's a philosopher, novelist, probably my biggest inspiration in all of life. She came up with the philosophy of objectivism, which I'm a fan of. But basically, emotional fuel, the idea was when you're just kind of running dry and you're not fired up and you don't have anything really to look forward to, what is it that really kind of gets you all riled up, gets you going, gets you out the door? That's your emotional fuel. So I have to give her credit for that. Realistically, this specific column, if you read it, it's all about will. How hard you try, which really became a recurring theme with the series, as you're going to see in more episodes that are coming up. At this time in my life, I recall, I was prepping for the Philly 2010. It was one of the hardest preps I've ever gone through just because, Raven was very young, only a couple months old at the time. I was working more hours than I think I'd ever worked in my life at that time, running on fumes. And so I was kind of obsessed with motivational videos at the time. I wasn't yet on Facebook. I had purposely not subjected myself to this hellish realm known as social media. I stayed away from that as long as I possibly could. And so because of that, I wasn't inundated with the 8,000, eat clean, train hard bullshit mantras that we see posted all over the place nowadays. So instead, I actually had to go seek my motivation back then. Go to YouTube, pull up videos, pull up whatever that got me riled up and fired up. I think one of the most interesting things about the column, you'll notice that there's a little section, I'm going to quote it, this is the warrior mentality that guides me day to day. And in working with my personal training clients, I try to cultivate that mentality to various degrees in my pupils. That idea of taking 100% ownership of your life and the means of achieving your own goals and enjoying it all in the process. So we kind of get a preview of the team warrior within a good 4 years before that existed. Here it is in the very first column, because I always knew that was the direction that everything was going. So I kind of find the warrior reference interesting. And then obviously the last thing to comment on is I didn't really have... There was nothing specific that inspired this column. This was the intro to the series, so to speak. So I knew I needed something motivational thrown in there. So I stumbled upon this great quote from Sophocles, and for those not in the know, Sophocles was one of the 3 great Greek tragedians, along with Euripides and Aeschylus, I believe. Wrote a lot of the great Greek tragedies. And the quote was, "Heaven never helps the man who will not act." In other words, get off your fucking lazy ass and make it happen, right? Pretty simple. Even Sophocles knew that back in the day, yet I'm still surrounded by a lot of people that can't seem to figure that out. Heaven never helps the man who will not act. In other words, quit asking for stuff to fall into your lap, quit praying for it, get up, make it happen. And of course, in classic David Johnson style, I had to juxtapose ancient Greek quote with Dorian Yates, because what goes better with bodybuilding than ancient Greek philosophy? Dorian Yates was my inspiration, in bodybuilding, because he was such a hard worker and such an analytical thinker, just approached everything meticulously and was relentless. Kind of ties this all together. Just crush everything in front of him. So, I included a little clip at the end of Dorian Yates, The Best of Dorian Yates, along with that Sophocles quote, because like I said in the intro, this is what motivates me. If it doesn't motivate you, tough shit. Find somebody else to follow or whatever. That's fine. No feelings hurt. And that was the very first episode. I feel that they got a lot better from here, but this at least got the project kicked off. So I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll be back next week with installment number 2, Emotional Fire. Out.